Some moments in life feel so vivid, so perfectly aligned, that you believe they were meant to be. That's how I felt when I met Emily. It wasn't a dramatic love at first sight moment, or a grand romantic gesture. It was something simpler, something real. She was standing in line at the campus coffee shop, shifting impatiently from foot to foot, clearly irritated at how long it was taking. I was behind her, just as frustrated, but unlike her, I kept my irritation to myself. When she turned around and sighed dramatically, our eyes met, and I made a dry remark about the inefficiency of the student-run cafe. She laughed, and from that moment on, something clicked between us. Emily was magnetic. She had this way of drawing people in, making them feel like they were the most interesting person in the room. She was sharp-witted, full of energy, and had an undeniable presence that made people gravitate toward her. I was different, calmer, more reserved, more logical in how I approached the world. She thrived on chaos, while I found comfort in order. And yet we fit. We started dating a few weeks after that first meeting, and it didn't take long for me to realize that Emily was unlike anyone I had ever known. She was ambitious, majoring in journalism with the dream of uncovering deep, hidden truths. She had a natural curiosity about people, always asking questions, always searching for the next big story. I was studying mechanical engineering, drawn to structure and precision, fascinated by how things worked. While she was chasing stories, I was busy solving equations, building models, and sketching out ideas for designs I hoped would one day become something more. Despite our differences, we complemented each other in a way that made sense. Emily brought excitement and spontaneity into my life, pulling me out of my carefully structured world. In return, I provided her with stability, grounding her when she needed it most. She would drag me to last-minute road trips, spur-of-the-moment adventures, while I would remind her of deadlines, appointments, and responsibilities she had almost forgotten. It was a balance that worked. Our friends used to joke that we were an odd match, but to me, there was never any doubt. I loved her from the very beginning. Everything about her felt effortless, as if we had been meant to cross paths. When we were together, the world felt just a little bit more exciting, a little more alive. We graduated together, walking across that stage with our hands clasped tightly, ready to take on whatever came next. While many of our friends were uncertain about their futures, Emily and I had a plan. She had landed a position at a local newspaper, and I had secured a job as an entry-level engineer. The pay wasn't great, but it didn't matter. We were young, full of dreams, and convinced that nothing could stand in our way. When I proposed a year later, it felt like the natural next step. There was no hesitation, no doubt in my mind. Emily said yes without missing a beat, and within a year, we were married in a small ceremony surrounded by close friends and family. It was the kind of wedding that people described as intimate and heartfelt, nothing extravagant, but filled with love. Looking back, those early years were some of the happiest of my life. We moved into a modest apartment, slowly building a life together. We weren't rich, but we had enough. Emily flourished in her career, always chasing the next big story, while I worked my way up in my company, eager to prove myself. Everything felt right. Everything felt real. I never once questioned the path we were on. I never once questioned her. The first few years of marriage were everything I had hoped for. We weren't wealthy, we weren't without struggles, but we were happy. Emily and I had built a life that felt solid, the kind of foundation people spend years trying to create. We rented a small apartment in the city, close enough to both our jobs to avoid long commutes, but far enough from downtown to be affordable. It wasn't much, just one bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a cramped living room, but it was ours. The walls were covered in pictures from our college days, shelves lined with books we had promised each other we would read but never did. It was a life we had built together, piece by piece, and in those days, that was all that mattered. Emily thrived in her career. From the moment she stepped into the newsroom, it was clear that she belonged there. She had a natural curiosity, an unrelenting drive to uncover the truth, and a confidence that made people want to talk to her. She started with small assignments, community pieces, human interest stories, But it wasn't long before she was given more responsibility. I was proud of her, watching as she moved up the ranks, her byline appearing in bigger and more widely read sections of the paper. Journalism was her passion, and I supported her every step of the way. My own career was more predictable, more structured. Engineering isn't the kind of profession that thrives on excitement, but I like that. I enjoyed the certainty of it, the precision, the logic, the way everything fit together when done correctly. I was methodical, patient, the kind of person who didn't rush into things without thinking them through. And in those early years, I thought everything through carefully, our finances, our future, our goals. I was always looking ahead, planning for the next step, making sure that we were set up for success. Emily was the opposite. She lived in the moment, always looking for the next adventure, the next challenge. She never worried about money the way I did, never stressed over the future as much as I did. "We'll figure it out," she'd always say whenever I brought up savings, investments, or retirement plans. And somehow, I always believed her. We spent our weekends with friends, filling our small apartment with laughter, music, and late-night conversations. We traveled when we could, taking road trips to places we had never been, getting lost in new cities, creating memories that felt larger than life. There were moments when I would catch myself just watching her, how she talked, how she laughed, how she seemed to light up every room she walked into, and I would think, this is it. This is the life I always wanted. A few years in, we decided it was time to take the next step. We had saved enough to buy a house, not a big one, but a place that we could truly call our own. It was in a quiet suburban neighborhood, lined with trees and filled with families. The kind of place where people knew their neighbors, where kids rode their bikes in the street, where everything felt safe. It needed work, but we were young, ambitious, and ready to make it ours. We spent weekends painting the walls, picking out furniture, and turning the house into something that reflected us. Emily loved decorating, filling the rooms with pieces she had found at thrift stores and antique shops, always looking for something unique. I handled the repairs, the small projects that turned the house into a home. We made a good team, balancing each other in the same way we always had. And then, Emily got pregnant. It wasn't a surprise. We had talked about starting a family, had imagined what it would be like to have kids running through the house, filling it with even more love and laughter. When she told me, I remember feeling an overwhelming sense of responsibility, a deep desire to be the kind of father who would always be there, always present. We prepared for the baby the way we had approached everything else in our lives, together. We turned one of the spare bedrooms into a nursery, painted the walls a soft shade of blue, and filled it with books and toys long before our child would be old enough to use them. Emily was excited, glowing in a way I had never seen before, and I felt like the luckiest man in the world. Looking back, those were the best years of my life. We had everything we had ever wanted. A home, careers we loved, a baby on the way. It felt like the kind of life people spend years trying to create. A life built on love, trust, and partnership. A life I believed would last forever. The day our son was born was the happiest of my life. I had spent months preparing, reading parenting books, researching the best cribs and car seats, and planning out every detail to make sure Emily and the baby had everything they needed. But nothing could have prepared me for the overwhelming love I felt when I first held him in my arms. He was so small, so fragile, yet in that moment, I felt an enormous weight settle on my shoulders, the weight of fatherhood, of responsibility, of wanting to be the kind of man my son would one day look up to. Emily was incredible throughout the entire process. Pregnancy had been difficult for her, morning sickness, exhaustion, the aches and pains that came with carrying a child. But she had handled it all with the same determination she brought to everything in life. Watching her become a mother only made me love her more. She was patient, nurturing, and completely devoted to our son from the moment he was born. Even in the sleepless nights that followed, as we took turns rocking him back to sleep, she never once complained. Those first few months were a blur of late nights, early mornings, and the kind of exhaustion that made us forget what day it was. But we were in it together. We had always been a team, and parenting was no different. I took on as much as I could, changing diapers, preparing bottles, letting Emily rest whenever possible, because I knew how much she had already sacrificed to bring our child into the world. Despite the challenges, we were happy. Life had shifted, but in a way that felt natural, like we were stepping into the next phase of our journey together. Our son grew quickly, his laughter filling our home, his tiny hands reaching for us at every moment. Watching Emily with him made my heart swell, seeing the way she held him, the way she comforted him, the way she loved him with every fiber of her being. As our son got older, our lives settled into a rhythm. I worked long hours, determined to provide for our growing family, while Emily had taken a temporary step back from work to focus on being a mother. She had always been passionate about her career, and I knew that eventually she would return to it, but for now, she was content. She spent her days with our son, taking him to parks, reading to him, teaching him new words. And in the evenings, we would sit together, just the three of us, enjoying the quiet moments that made all the chaos worthwhile. A couple of years later, Emily got pregnant again. This time, it felt different, not just because we had been through it before, but because we were more prepared, more experienced. We knew what to expect, what challenges lay ahead, and we faced them with the same unwavering partnership that had carried us through everything else. When our daughter was born, our family felt complete. A boy and a girl, two beautiful children who filled our home with love and laughter. Life was good. Our careers were stable, our home was warm and filled with happiness, and we had built the kind of life we had always dreamed of. Emily eventually returned to work, balancing motherhood and her career with an effortless grace that I admired. She was amazing at what she did, and I never once doubted that she could handle it all. The years passed quickly, our children growing before our eyes. There were birthday parties, family vacations, Christmas mornings filled with excitement and laughter. We were a family, a real, tangible unit, and in my heart, I believed that nothing could ever break us. I was wrong. Looking back, I wonder when it truly began. Not just the physical act of betrayal, but the first small shift, the moment where Emily started to slip away from me, piece by piece, while I remained oblivious. Was it a glance too long at her phone? A night out that stretched just a little later than usual? Or had it started even earlier, in ways so subtle that I never stood a chance of catching it? At the time, I noticed nothing. Life had settled into a routine, busy but comfortable. I worked hard to provide for my family, often staying late at the office to meet deadlines or secure promotions. Emily had gone back to work full-time, her career taking off in ways I had always known it would. Journalism had always been her passion, and as she moved from local reporting to more ambitious projects, I encouraged her, proud of everything she had accomplished. But with that success came change. At first, it was small, longer hours, more time spent on assignments, new colleagues whose names I didn't recognize. She started traveling for work, something that hadn't been necessary before, and while I missed her, I understood. I trusted her. Why wouldn't I? It wasn't until months later that I realized how often she was gone. A few late nights turned into full weekends away. There was always a reason, an urgent deadline, an important interview, a last-minute press event. Whenever I asked, she had answers that made sense, explanations that never gave me a reason to doubt her. But something felt different. It wasn't just the time apart. It was the way she acted when she was home. At first, I chalked it up to stress. She was distracted, always on her phone, texting late into the night. When I walked into the room, she would angle the screen away, but I convinced myself that she was just protecting sensitive work information. After all, journalism could be unpredictable. Maybe she was covering something confidential. She started dressing differently too, nothing drastic, just a little more effort, a little more attention to detail. She spent more time getting ready in the mornings, choosing outfits with more care than before. She worked out more, something she had never been particularly dedicated to in the past. I told myself I was imagining it. That she was just taking better care of herself, that it was normal for people to change over time. Then came the nights where she wouldn't answer my calls. The weekends away that didn't seem as clearly explained as they had before. The growing distance between us, the way she would kiss me absent-mindedly rather than with any real affection. The way her laughter felt forced when we were together. One night she came home late, later than usual. I was already in bed, half asleep, when I heard the front door quietly open. She moved through the house carefully, almost like she didn't want to wake me. When she slipped into bed beside me, I caught the faintest scent of something unfamiliar. A cologne that wasn't mine. I told myself I was imagining it. But deep down, something inside me stirred, a quiet, uneasy whisper that I tried to ignore. Because if I let myself listen to it, I wasn't sure I would be able to handle what it was trying to tell me. Denial is a strange thing. It creeps in slowly, wrapping itself around you like a warm blanket, whispering that everything is fine when deep down, you know it isn't. I told myself I was overthinking, that the unease twisting in my gut was just stress from work, exhaustion from long nights with the kids. I told myself that Emily's distance was temporary, that she was just busy, that we would find our way back to each other. But the signs kept coming. She started guarding her phone more. She had always been open with it before, leaving it on the counter, on the nightstand, never caring if I glanced at her messages or answered a call for her. Now, it was always with her. If she left a room, the phone went with her. If I reached for it, even absent-mindedly, she would snatch it up before I could see the screen. Then there were the work trips. They became more frequent, always at the last minute, always with vague details. "I'll be in Chicago for a conference," she would say, but when I asked where she was staying, she would hesitate. "The company booked the hotel," she'd add quickly, as if to close the subject. It never used to be like that. One night, I asked if she wanted to plan a weekend getaway, just the two of us, a chance to reconnect. She smiled, said it was a great idea, but there was something forced about it. "Let me check my schedule," she said. I never heard about it again. I started watching her more closely, not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't help it. I noticed the way she dressed when she left the house. How she would spritz on perfume before her meetings. How she would check her reflection one last time before walking out the door. How she stopped wearing her wedding ring when she went to work. That one hit me the hardest. I didn't ask her about it at first. I wanted to believe there was an innocent explanation. Maybe she had forgotten it. Maybe it was uncomfortable while typing. Maybe. I clung to those maybes like a drowning man grasping for air. Then came the moments that hurt the most. I tried to hold her at night, and she would pull away, mumbling that she was tired. When I kissed her, she would turn her head at the last second, my lips landing on her cheek instead of her mouth. We had always been affectionate. We used to steal kisses in the kitchen while making dinner, hold hands while watching TV, send each other flirty messages throughout the day. Now, it was as if she had to force herself to touch me. The laughter was gone too. We used to talk for hours about nothing, joking about the little things, making each other smile after long days. But now, when I tried to make her laugh, she barely reacted. Conversations became mechanical. She would ask about my day, and when I answered, I could see in her eyes that she wasn't really listening. I still remember the night I finally confronted her, gently, cautiously. "You seem distant lately," I said. "Is everything okay?" She looked up from her phone, her expression unreadable. "What do you mean?" "I don't know. You don't seem like yourself." She sighed, running a hand through her hair. "It's just work. Things have been stressful." I nodded, pretending to accept her answer. Pretending that I hadn't heard that excuse 100 times before. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But some part of me, some deep, unshakable part, knew that something was very, very wrong. And I was afraid to find out what it was. There's a certain kind of loneliness that comes with suspecting the person you love is lying to you. It's not just about the deception itself, it's the isolation, the feeling that you are slowly being shut out of a world you once belonged to. That's what it felt like with Emily. Like she was still there, still moving through our house, still sleeping in our bed, but somehow, I had already lost her. The distance between us grew, stretching wider with every late night, every unanswered call, every vague excuse. I started keeping track of things, not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't help it. A missed text here, a work trip that didn't line up with her usual schedule, a conversation where she stumbled over the details. It was always little things, just small enough to be explained away, just big enough to make my stomach churn with doubt. One night she said she was going out with coworkers after a long day at the office. I told her to have fun and not to worry about coming home late. She hesitated, just for a second, before saying, "Thanks. I'll probably be back around midnight." Midnight came and went. 1 o'clock. 2 o'clock. I sent a text, just a simple "Hey, you okay?" but there was no response. At 3:30 a.m., she walked through the door. Her hair was messy, her makeup slightly smudged, and she reeked of perfume, too much, as if she had reapplied it at some point in the night. "You're up?" she asked, pausing in the doorway like a deer caught in headlights. "Yeah," I said, keeping my voice even. "Got worried when I didn't hear from you." She sighed, rubbing her temples. "I'm sorry. My phone died, and we ended up staying out later than I expected." I nodded, pretending to believe her. But something about the way she said it, too rehearsed, too casual, made my skin crawl. Another time, she told me she had to go on an overnight trip for work. It was last minute, nothing she had mentioned before, and when I asked where she was going, she waved a hand dismissively. "Just a short conference," she said. "I'll be back tomorrow night." That evening, I put the kids to bed and sat on the couch, staring at my phone, willing myself not to check up on her. But by midnight I caved. I opened the location sharing app we had set up years ago, something we had used for safety, for convenience, never out of suspicion. Her location was turned off. Emily never turned off her location. Not once in all the years we had been together. I sat there, staring at the blank screen, my chest tightening. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe her phone had died, maybe there was a glitch. Maybe she just didn't want me checking up on her. But deep down I knew. The Emily I knew, the woman I married, would never have shut me out like this. And yet here she was, slipping further and further away from me, right in front of my eyes. Suspicion is a slow poison. It doesn't kill you all at once, it seeps into your thoughts, creeping through your mind until it taints everything you see. That's what it felt like in those days. I couldn't look at Emily without wondering where she had been, couldn't hear her laughter without questioning who else had made her smile. It consumed me. And worst of all, I had no proof. But I needed it. I had spent months trying to convince myself that I was being paranoid, that I was overthinking, that Emily was just stressed, busy, distant, but still mine. I needed to be wrong. I needed something to pull me back from the edge, to remind me that the woman I loved hadn't been lying to me for years. So I did something I never thought I would do. I went looking for the truth. It started small. Checking her phone when she left it unattended, not reading her messages, just looking at the notifications. But she had already covered her tracks. No suspicious messages, no unknown names. If something was there, she had buried it deep. Then I checked our bank statements. Emily and I had always trusted each other financially, so we never felt the need to hide purchases. But as I scrolled through the recent transactions, something caught my eye. Hotel bookings. Not extravagant, just enough to raise a red flag. A charge for a restaurant across town, one I had never been to, one I had never heard her mention. A hotel and a restaurant by itself could mean anything. Maybe it was work. Maybe it was nothing. But I knew better. I wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. Instead, I started paying closer attention. Watching her behavior more carefully, noticing the way she would slip away to take calls, the way she would come home with the faintest trace of another scent on her clothes. The way she stopped looking me in the eye. Then one night she slipped. It was late. She was in the shower, her phone sitting on the nightstand, the screen lighting up with a message. I wasn't going to look. I had promised myself I wouldn't. But then I saw the name. Just a first name. A man's name. And 2 words. Miss you. My blood ran cold. I reached for the phone before I could stop myself, my hands shaking as I opened the message thread. But before I could read anything else, the screen locked. I sat there, staring at it, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. I could have confronted her right then and there. I could have asked her who he was, demanded to see the messages, forced her to tell me the truth. But something stopped me. I needed undeniable proof. I needed something she couldn't lie her way out of. So I made a decision. I was going to get a DNA test. Because the thought had already been there, lingering in the back of my mind, whispering in the silence of our home. The timing of our children's births. The way she had changed after each pregnancy. The way our son and daughter, beautiful, innocent, perfect, didn't look like me. I had ignored it for years. Pushed it away. Convinced myself that love was stronger than doubt. But now, I had to know the truth. No matter what it cost me. The DNA test was supposed to be a desperate act, a final attempt to silence the gnawing suspicion that had been growing inside me like a tumor. But deep down I knew. I had known for a long time, even if I had never wanted to admit it. The late nights, the lies, the way Emily looked at me like I was a stranger in my own home, it had all been leading to this. And yet, when the kit arrived in its plain, unmarked package, my hands still trembled as I opened it, as if some part of me still wanted to believe I was wrong. Taking the samples felt like a betrayal in itself. My son giggled as I swabbed his cheek, oblivious to the weight of what I was doing. My daughter, always trusting, let me do the same without question. I sealed the samples, my fingers shaking, and for the first time in my life, I felt like a coward. What kind of man even had to do this? What kind of father? But that was the problem, wasn't it? I wasn't a father. Not to them. I had to know for sure, even if it destroyed me. 2 weeks passed like a slow, torturous death. I barely slept, barely ate, barely spoke to Emily. She noticed, of course. How could she not? But I fed her the same lies she had been feeding me for years. Work is stressful. I'm just tired. Nothing's wrong. I wanted to see how it felt to live in her world. To lie so easily. To deceive without guilt. She didn't push. Maybe because she was relieved. Maybe because, in some sick way, she was glad I wasn't asking questions anymore. When the results came in, I was alone. The house was silent, empty, just me and the weight of the truth sitting in my inbox, waiting to be opened. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the mouse, my body frozen in place. This was it. The moment where everything changed. Where I would finally know just how deep the betrayal ran. With a deep breath, I clicked. 2 words. Probability of paternity 0%. The words blurred in front of me, but no matter how many times I blinked, they didn't change. They wouldn't change. I scrolled down, faster now, my hands moving on their own, my pulse hammering in my ears so loudly I thought my skull might crack open. Probability of paternity 0%. Again. My son. My daughter. Either of them were mine. A sound tore from my throat, something between a laugh and a strangled gasp. My stomach twisted violently, and I stumbled back from the desk as if the words on the screen had physically struck me. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I had spent the last 15 years building a life, a family, pouring everything I had into these children, into this marriage, and it had all been a goddamn lie. A cruel, vicious joke played on me by the woman I had once loved more than life itself. The rage hit me like a freight train, sudden and unstoppable. I slammed my fist into the desk so hard the laptop rattled, but the pain did nothing to ground me. My entire body felt like it was burning from the inside out, a fury so intense I thought I might explode right then and there. 15 years. 15 fucking years I had given to her, to them, believing I was their father, believing we were a family. And all the while, Emily had known. She had carried another man's children, looked me in the eye, let me raise them, let me love them, let me sacrifice for them, and she had known. I paced the room like a caged animal, fists clenched so tightly my nails dug into my palms. Images flashed through my mind, moments I had treasured now tainted with the bitter sting of betrayal. Teaching my son how to throw a baseball. Holding my daughter's hand as she took her first steps. Wiping away their tears, rocking them to sleep, promising them I would always be there for them. Promises that had never even been mine to make. They weren't my children. They never had been. A guttural roar ripped from my throat, and before I knew it, my hands were around the nearest chair, lifting it, throwing it with everything I had. It smashed against the wall, splintering into pieces, but the destruction did nothing to satisfy the fire raging inside me. I wanted to break everything. I wanted to tear down the walls of this house that had been built on a foundation of lies. I wanted to hear Emily scream in fear the way I was screaming inside. I wanted her to suffer. This wasn't just cheating. This wasn't just a betrayal. This was theft. She had stolen my life, my choices, my future. She had played me for a fool, let me be the idiot who paid for everything, who raised another man's children, who loved them like they were his own. And now, she was going to pay. I grabbed my phone, my fingers tightening around it so hard I thought it might shatter. My heart pounded against my ribs like a war drum. My thoughts were razor-sharp, cutting through any lingering doubt. There was only one thing left to do. It was time for Emily to face the consequences. The rage didn't fade. If anything, it grew, spreading through my body like wildfire, consuming every rational thought, every ounce of restraint I had left. My mind was no longer clouded with confusion or doubt, everything was clear now. The woman I had loved, the woman I had built my entire life around, had betrayed me in the most unforgivable way. This wasn't just cheating. This wasn't just lies. This was 15 years of calculated deception, of looking me in the eyes every single day and pretending to be my wife while carrying another man's children. Letting me love them. Letting me believe they were mine. Letting me live in a fantasy while she played me for a goddamn fool. I wasn't going to be that fool anymore. I shut the laptop, my breaths ragged and uneven, my entire body shaking with barely contained fury. I needed a plan. I couldn't just explode, couldn't just throw accusations at her and let her weasel her way out of it with lies and excuses. No, I needed to strip everything from her, the way she had stripped everything from me. I needed to make her feel the same helplessness, the same gut-wrenching devastation. First, the house. It was in my name, something I had insisted on when we bought it, back when I thought I was protecting our family. Back when I thought Emily would never be the type of woman who would need protecting from. That decision was about to pay off. She and her children had lived here for years under the roof I provided. That ended today. Next, the finances. I went to my computer, logging into our joint bank account. We had always shared everything. Her paychecks, my income, all of it pooled together into one place. She had access to it, but I was the one who managed the bills, the mortgage, the expenses. That meant I was the one who had control. And in the span of a few clicks, I made sure Emily had nothing. I transferred every last cent into my personal account. The savings, the emergency fund, even the petty cash we kept for household expenses. Gone. Then I called my lawyer. I had never considered divorce before. Even when things had been strained, even when I had started to suspect something was wrong, I had never allowed myself to think about ending our marriage. But now it was the only thing on my mind. My lawyer answered on the second ring, his voice groggy. He hadn't been expecting a call this late. I need to file for divorce, I said, my voice flat, emotionless. Immediately. He asked questions, but I didn't answer them. I didn't need sympathy. I needed results. I needed paperwork drawn up, assets secured, and a plan to ensure Emily walked away with nothing. No house, no money, no support from me ever again. I wasn't going to stop there. She was going to come home soon, walk through that door like everything was normal, like she wasn't the most disgusting liar I had ever met. And I wanted to see her face when she realized she had lost everything. I went to the bedroom, grabbing a duffel bag and yanking open drawers, shoving her clothes inside without care. The expensive dresses, the jewelry I had bought her, the sentimental gifts I had given her over the years, they meant nothing now. I dragged the bag to the front door, my fury growing with each passing second. By the time her car pulled into the driveway, I was standing there, waiting. She stepped out, her heels clicking against the pavement, her phone in hand, barely paying attention as she walked up to the house. She was texting someone, probably him. Probably the man who had been laughing at me behind my back for years. My blood boiled at the thought. She barely had time to register my expression before I spoke. Get inside. Now. For the first time in a long time, I saw something flicker in her eyes, uncertainty. Maybe even fear. Good. Because this was just the beginning. Emily stepped inside, her eyes flicking between my face and the duffel bag by the door. I could see the gears turning in her head, trying to piece together what was happening. She wasn't stupid, she could feel the shift in the air, the kind of suffocating tension that only came before something irreversible. She opened her mouth to speak, probably to lay the groundwork for some lie, some excuse, some pathetic attempt to wriggle out of what she had done. But I wasn't going to give her the chance. Shut up, I said, my voice like ice. Not a fucking word. Her lips snapped shut. For the first time in years, I had her full attention. I walked to the kitchen counter, picked up my laptop, and turned the screen toward her. The email was still open, the results still staring back at me like a goddamn death sentence. Her eyes landed on the words, and I saw it, that split-second reaction she couldn't hide. Her face paled, her breath hitched, and then, just like that, she tried to mask it. Tried to play it off, to reach for some explanation. I felt my jaw tighten, my hands clenching into fists. Go ahead, I said, my voice dangerously calm. Explain it to me, Emily. Explain how the children I've been raising, the children I have given everything for, aren't mine. She opened her mouth again, but this time, I didn't let her get a single syllable out. Wait. Actually, let me guess. I stepped closer, my heart hammering against my ribs, my entire body shaking with barely contained rage. You didn't know? Some bullshit about a medical mix-up. Or maybe you were confused about who the father was. Maybe you thought there was a chance they were mine, and you just didn't want to hurt me? My voice was rising now, my self-control slipping with every word. Or were you just waiting to see if I was dumb enough to never question it? If I'd keep playing daddy to his kids while you laughed behind my back? She flinched, and I felt a twisted satisfaction in that. Don't, I snapped. Don't you dare speak. Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. She knew there was no way out of this. No way to twist the truth into something digestible. No carefully constructed lie would work here. She was caught. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay in control. I want you out, I said finally, each word dripping with venom. Tonight. Right now. You and those kids, his kids, you're leaving this house. Her eyes widened. No, she whispered, shaking her head. No, you don't mean that. I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. I have never meant anything more in my life. She took a step forward, her expression shifting from shock to desperation. They're still your kids, she said, her voice trembling. You raised them. They love you. Something in me snapped. They are not my kids, I roared, my voice shaking the walls. They were never my kids. You stole that from me. You lied to me. You let me live a fucking fantasy while you played me for a goddamn fool. Tears welled in her eyes, but I felt nothing. No sympathy. No remorse. Just the deep, unrelenting need to erase her from my life completely. I already emptied our accounts, I said coldly. Everything is in my name. You have nothing. No house. No money. No future here. You made sure of that the moment you decided to turn me into a joke. I gestured to the duffel bag. Take your shit and get out. She stared at me, her face crumbling, her entire world unraveling in front of her. And I wanted her to feel that. I wanted her to feel a fraction of the devastation she had inflicted on me. But even in her misery, I saw it, the gears turning, the desperation to find a way out, to manipulate the situation. And I wasn't going to give her the chance. I took a step forward, towering over her. "If you don't leave right now, Emily, I swear to God, I will make your life even worse than it already is." My voice was low, dangerous, and filled with the kind of hatred I had never known I was capable of feeling. "I will tell everyone. Your family. Your friends. The kids. I will make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of woman you are. You think you can talk your way out of this? You think you can twist the truth like you always do? Try me." Her breath hitched. She knew I meant it. For the first time, she understood that she had lost. She let out a shaky breath, then slowly bent down, grabbing the duffel bag with trembling hands. She was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face, but I didn't care. She could cry all she wanted. It wouldn't change a goddamn thing. Without another word, she walked to the door, pausing for just a second, maybe waiting for me to stop her, to give her some kind of mercy. I said nothing. She stepped out. The door closed behind her. And just like that, she was gone. I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty space where she had just been, my chest rising and falling with deep, shuddering breaths. The house was silent. Too silent. I had won. So why did it feel so goddamn empty? The silence in the house was unbearable. It stretched across the walls, seeped into the furniture, settled deep into my bones. For years this house had been full of laughter, of voices, of life. Now, it felt like a hollow shell, stripped of everything it once held. I should have felt victorious. I had done what any man in my position should do. I had taken back control, stripped Emily of everything the way she had stripped me of my dignity, my trust, my future. She had walked out of that door with nothing, just as I had planned. But as I stood there, staring at the empty space where she had been, I didn't feel victorious. I felt ruined. I walked through the house, my footsteps echoing against the hardwood floors. The framed photos were still on the walls, pictures of a life that never really existed. A wedding photo, where I stood beside a woman I thought I knew. A family vacation picture, the kids smiling up at me, looking at me like I was their world. But I wasn't. I never had been. With a growl, I ripped one of the photos from the wall, the glass shattering as it hit the floor. Then another. And another. The rage still burned inside me, but there was nothing left to direct it at. She was gone. The kids, no, her kids, were gone. And now, I was left standing in the ruins of a life I had never really owned. I found myself in the bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed where Emily had slept beside me for 15 years. I could still smell her perfume on the sheets, a scent that once brought comfort but now made my stomach churn. The betrayal sat heavy in my chest, pressing down until I felt like I couldn't breathe. The weight of it all hit me at once. The years wasted. The love I had given to people who were never mine. The reality that my entire marriage, my entire goddamn life, had been a lie. The pain of it was unbearable, raw and suffocating, like a wound that would never heal. The next few days passed in a haze. I went through the motions, but I wasn't really living. I barely ate. I barely slept. I ignored the calls from family, from friends, from anyone who might ask questions I wasn't ready to answer. Then, the texts started coming. From Emily. She was begging me to talk. Saying she had nowhere to go, that the kids were asking about me, that we could work this out. The audacity of it made my blood boil. Work this out? After 15 years of lies? After letting me raise another man's children while she lived comfortably on my loyalty, my money, my love? I blocked her number. But the kids? I hesitated. Because no matter what the DNA test said, they were mine in some way. I had held them as babies, taught them, guided them, protected them. Cutting them out completely felt like cutting off a part of myself. But what choice did I have? If they ever found out the truth, would they hate me for leaving? Or would they hate her for the lie? I didn't know. And I wasn't ready to find out. Months passed. Then a year. I rebuilt my life, piece by piece. I focused on work, poured myself into projects that kept my mind busy. I traveled, took up new hobbies, reconnected with old friends. I did everything I could to move on. But some wounds don't heal. They just become part of you. I still think about them sometimes. The kids, mostly. I wonder if they ever look at old pictures and ask themselves why their father, the man who raised them, disappeared overnight. If they ever resent me for it. If they ever question Emily, if she ever told them the truth. But I don't ask. I don't reach out. Some things are better left buried. Emily? I never saw her again. Last I heard, she was struggling, bouncing from one place to another, trying to rebuild a life from the ruins of what she destroyed. A part of me wanted to feel satisfaction in that, to revel in the fact that she finally got what she deserved. But in the end, I felt nothing. Because she wasn't my problem anymore. And for the first time in 15 years I was free.